What's not bullshit is that there are areas of clinical operational practice that you can go in today and solve a lot of problems with AI.
IBM wrote off a $4 billion loss.
You grow skeptic because you know your EMR is hard to integrate.
The future was ended, and then the market all kind of tanked by 20-30%.
There's a lot of people who are tempted to, fudge the data. Whether it's AI or not, this happens in science, this happens in medicine, this happens in pharma.
So, AI-led healthcare startups pulled in 62% of digital health funding in the first half of 2025, which is a decent number, about $4 billion. And they were seeing an 84x jump in valuations from seed to scale. So you get some AI involved, 84x jump in valuation, which is quite large. Yet, only 64% of AI deployments actually produce ROI. IBM wrote off a $4 billion loss on Watson Health, while Abridge doubled its valuation to $5.3 billion. And today we're going to kind of cut through the noise and see, what does AI actually do to earnings? So my first question would be, how come Watson, which is affiliated with IBM, which is a decent company, how come they had a $4 billion loss? I thought AI was supposed to make companies better. Where's this loss coming from for Watson Health?
I think Watson is set up a little bit different. So, from day one, Watson was a moonshot. And so by definition, moonshots lose a lot of money until they win. But when they win, they will win big. OpenAI was in a similar situation, right? Like OpenAI was a moonshot at some point, and then, over time it became a reality. And today they're worth $1 gazillion. IBM is kind of pretty much in the same. So, IBM Watson 2011, there was a big buzz around Watson winning Jeopardy. So that created the hype, and then IBM decided to go into cancer treatment and drug discovery, and they were basically, in my opinion, they were kind of tackling it in a way that is divorced from the science, and then this becomes a problem. Like, to get data around cancer and kind of cancer treatment, it's going to be very difficult to put your hands on this data. Cancer is one of the most complex cases ever. And so trying to kind of tackle a complicated clinical area such as cancer and have to rely on synthetic data, having to kind of, it's going to be very, very difficult for you to get data. Like, FDA is going to be on your case, especially for you as a big company as IBM. FDA is going to be on your case. The clinics are going to be skeptic. So as a result, if I want to think about, kind of reflect on IBM Watson, and the thing that pretty much made it a write-off is there was some work that was done in 2012 with MD Anderson Cancer Center, where IBM was supposed to develop an oncology expert advisor, and that would guide treatment decisions. And if we look at how that unfolded, initial contract was supposed to be like 6 months, $2.4 million. And then over 4 years, it became a $62 million contract that expanded to lung cancer, expanded to different leukemia types, but then pretty much that project with $62 million did not deliver. And so if you're kind of coming from that lens, like, integrations were difficult. So if I take something like an IBM Watson, I think it kind of became a big thing when, Watson won Jeopardy. I think it was around 2011. Then, Watson's foray into healthcare was quite problematic. So first of all, you have to kind of keep in mind that Watson was built as a moonshot. Sometimes these things, pay out, and when they do, they'll pay out massively. Think of OpenAI when it started. Like, nobody believed or nobody saw the commercial aspect of OpenAI until it became real and it became, the next big thing. But Watson started in the same vein. Watson was trying to tackle pretty much kind of, AGI and general intelligence. Their foray into healthcare was interesting, where they picked the most complicated aspect of healthcare, which is around cancer and cancer treatment. They had at some point a contract with MD Anderson cancer centers, and that didn't play well. They spent a lot of money, and what we saw is the model came up. So first of all, the whole Watson was a black box. So people couldn't figure out, like when it was making recommendations to treatment to patients, there was no traceability into like how did that treatment recommendation came to be. And so you have a black box solution trying to tackle a very complicated problem in healthcare. Integrations was a problem, acquiring data was a problem. You know, IBM is a big giant. It draws attention and scrutiny from everyone. And I think all of these factors combined, the complexity of the problem they're trying to tackle, their high profile trials that didn't go so well, all of these combined led to kind of the demise of Watson. And I would compare this to AI that is highly practical, that is solving today's problems with today's technology capabilities.
So I haven't looked too much into it, but negative $4 billion is a lot of money. Like, how does IBM allow this to happen? Like, once you're $2 billion in, it's sort of a sunk cost fallacy. You might as well put another $2 billion in and hope it works. Like, what's creating this, that they go in so deep and lose all this money? Ignorance?
I wouldn't think so, right? Like there are very smart people who work at IBM. There are very smart people who work with Watson. It's just a matter of, like it's hard for you to kind of backtrack. Like what led them to those decisions? What are the internal decisions that made it sound like investing another $2 billion into this is a good idea? But keep in mind that usually it's not like you're like, hey, I'm going to spend $2 billion on this. Usually there's multiple projects, multiple initiatives, or each with its own funding. And there were some commercial contracts, right? So keep in mind that Watson was involved and we're doing commercial contracts with hospitals, with cancer centers, et cetera. It's just when those things don't pan out, when your projects run over budget, you're going to start to lose money. And I believe that a lot of those losses were, either IBM investing in certain areas that didn't pan out, or basically commercial contracts that ran over budget where their clients were not willing to pay the additional fees, and therefore they had to absorb some of the costs to make this successful. And look, for a company like IBM, $1 billion, $2 billion, $4 billion, it's still not a significant amount. Of course, for a startup, it's life-changing. For a person, it's life-changing. But for a company at that scale, I would say it's still a chunk of change.
Yeah, they can absorb it. It sounds scary, but in reality, it's fine. So then we also have another company called Abridge, which is the opposite, right? So we talked about Abridge in the intro. Obviously, Abridge is basically the exact opposite. What's the difference between Abridge and Watson? What did Abridge do right, would you say?
I think they didn't try to tackle the most complicated areas first. They focused on the, what we call ambient or like scribes, so ambient healthcare. They took a problem that is more now, not a moonshot. What can we deliver practically? And they, started to deliver, and they continue to deliver in a practical way. It's, like we were in health a conference in Vegas a couple of weeks ago, and they were like an official sponsor of the event. They seem to be doing well. And so to me, it's moonshot versus practical are very different things, right? Moonshots will lose money to some extent, and you expect them to do that because you're actually tackling a very hard problem. And it's, it's a kind of bet versus payoff, right? Yes, you might have made a $4 billion bet, but the payoff on that $4 billion could have been, what is AI's value? Like, it's worth to pull OpenAI valuation today and just compare, because you could have achieved that valuation too. IBM could have been the next OpenAI or the OpenAI of the world if their bets played out.
So is it worth it then to do these moonshots, like for venture capital or for Microsoft or IBM or Apple, Google?
They do that all the time, whether it's IBM or whether it's Google or whether it's Meta. If you're a big company and you have the cash reserves, and especially it goes back to the kind of mentality of the founders. Is it worth it? I think so. Yes, because without this, there are no other, to advance humanity, you got to do some moonshots, but not everybody is in a place to kind of take those moonshots.
Got it. And I guess there's a bit of survivorship bias. I mean, all this technology, everything was probably a moonshot at some point. It's just after it's made it, you no longer think about it that way, right?
Yep, pretty much, right? OpenAI was that. Like, it's helpful to remember that when OpenAI started, go back to 20, I think it was also 2011. Everybody thought this is bullshit, never gonna see the light of day. Lots of people believed in the vision. Keep in mind that also the cool thing about moonshots and doing hard things is it attracts a certain type of people, smart people who are aspirational, are motivated to work on hard problems. So you tend to build a great team around you until it either pays out massively or doesn't.
I have here in my notes, Shukri, 30 companies audited where AI was actually implemented. They found that there was a lot of hidden costs, rebuilding from scratch at Series B when investors discovered the truth. For example, there was a company that was doing radiology, and they said their AI increased efficiency by 451%, but in reality, it was more or less 30 to 40%. It seems like we're almost in, I guess people say it, that it's a bubble. And it's one of those things where you can kind of make claims about a technology that maybe people don't really truly understand yet. Do you think that's happening a lot in the AI healthcare world right now?
Of course. Of course. Do I think we're in a bubble? I think we are in a bubble, 100%. But that's how every new, this is how every new technology is born. Is that the blockchain at some point, the kind of crypto and the blockchain, you go into, you start with, you're relatively obscure, nobody knows about this technology, only a few handful of people who do, and then over time, something happens and then kicks off that technology into mainstream, such as, the price of a crypto going up, or, OpenAI being able to achieve those, great things and do, things and bring efficiencies, and that would drive FOMO, right? So now investors want to invest. If you're an investor and missed out on OpenAI, what is your answer? Oh, I'm going to go invest in other AI companies. And then once a certain amount of investors start to invest in AI, other investors will follow suit, right? That's something that's called like investor herd dynamics, that once people kind of go into one thing, then others would want to go into one thing, and then anyone who missed out will try to find the next best opportunity against that thing. And by the time you know it, you're billions of dollars in, and then other things unfold, and reality kind of hits you in the face, and then you're like, oh, we think we overinvested in this, and then you kind of go through that kind of death cycle where less money gets invested, the market reconsolidates, you have less players, you'll still have winners that emerge out of all of that bubble, but then out of 100 winners, out of 100 in that space, you'll have 20% that pan out.
In 2021, I used to work as a craps dealer in a casino, and it used to make me laugh. I'd go there, everyone would come, they'd say, Tesla's the future, Tesla's gonna be big. Then next day, Bitcoin is the future. Then it was Dogecoin is the future. NFTs are the future. GameStop is the future. They're gonna turn the company around. It's gonna be the future. And it was hilarious. You could literally track the bubble as it went along. Every week it was something different. And then the Fed raised rates, and then it was over. And then there was no more future after that. The future was ended, and then the market all kind of tanked by 20, 30%. What's bullshit and what's not in AI in the healthcare space?
I think that what's not bullshit is that there are areas of clinical operational practice that you can go in today and solve a lot of problems with AI. Scribes is such an example, right? I think scribes and kind of pretty much I would say kind of call type agents, scribe type of agents, clinical workflow agents that work on extracting data. To me, those deliver a lot of value. They take away repetitive work. They are able to kind of give us information that we couldn't easily scrape or obtain before from documents, from PDFs, from images. And I think that's extremely valuable. What is BS? It's hard to say what is BS, because until you kind of went into a company and looked under the hood and kind of looked at their solution and looked at their case studies, everything looks good on the surface. Everybody presents their best face on the surface, and therefore it's really hard to say. But the best bet is to wait a long enough time, right? Give it a year or two, and you'll start to see the winners emerge, and all the BS will kind of fall to the sideline. But you have to let things play out before you find that out.
When I was at Ontario MD, there was a lot of different scribes that were sponsoring the event, probably about 4 or 5. And I spoke to a couple doctors here and there, and I noticed none of them seemed to have an AI scribe. It was very interesting. None of these doctors had one. They were still doing it old school way. They hadn't taken the leap yet and dived into AI. So when will we see this AI take over? Because it seems like there's a bit of stubbornness from the medical industry to really go all in.
I think the demographics play a role in that. The systems that you're using at the clinic will play a role in that, right? Like if you have an ancient system that you try to integrate 3, 4, 5 times into other systems, whether AI or not is irrelevant, but you grow skeptic because you know your EMR is hard to integrate. You know that, every other time you try to integrate that, it didn't play out nicely. And then you also factor in, what's the average age of a physician? Is it 55? Is it 60? So those are physicians who did not grow around tech. And so you have to let time now take care of that. So as fresh physicians hit the workforce that are more technology enabled, that are kind of grew around technology, you have less of a skepticism and more of people who are just like, hey, this is a native way I do things. Like I do things, like it's just, if you take a millennial now or a Gen Zer, and you tell them, I'm going to take away all of your tech tools, they're going to be like, no, what the hell are you talking about? Like, bring me back my tools. I need these things. Like, I have a tool for my social life, but I don't have this tool for my medical life. How come, right? And I think that's where adoption grows over time as older generation of practitioners leave the practice, retire. You have newer generations who are more, tech savvy, digitally native, who just expect to have more and more tools. And so I think there is some of that playing out.
Got it. So then, so as older people get phased out, younger people come in, then we'll see more AI. And as you said before, there's kind of moonshot AI, then we also have practical AI. Now, if you yourself right now bought a medical clinic, whatever, some kind of medical business, an older guy was on the way out, you were a younger guy taking it over, how would you get AI involved, but specifically towards earnings? You want the earnings of the clinic to go up. How would you use AI to do that?
Well, I have to look at what is my earning, what is my current earning, like what is driving me, is it just more patients in the door? That's where I would invest. Or is it just servicing the patients that I have faster? Can I squeeze in additional encounters per day? Can I offer add value services to those patients who I'm servicing today? I think the answer is it's highly personalized to a clinic that I talk to, right? So I think for example, dermatologists seem to do really, really well because they do their core dermatology practice, but then they're able to offer a whole range of products and services around it that is private. So I have the same patient who came in maybe to, get a lesion removed. Now I can upsell them on, hey, here's a great skin product for you. Here is this other thing. Oh, are you interested in a cosmetic? And so there is a chance for you to monetize and re-monetize the same patients over and over again. That to me is one thing that'll be kind of the easy one. And then you also have to tackle the more complicated areas, like am I driving enough patients in the door or not? How do I market? How do I advertise? And then, if you're something like a specialist, you cannot directly advertise, hey, I'm a gastroenterologist, come see me. So you have to drive more referrals. And those usually come from, family medicine or other specialties. So how do you build those referral pipelines? That's what I would do on the front end. But then you would look also at the back end and say, okay, great, how am I doing when it comes to, insurance billing? How many, rejections I'm getting? How much time I'm, spending dealing with claims? What is the efficiency on the people I have? What is the efficiency on the property or the location or the, where I am right now? Can I service better patients in other locations? So there's a lot of variables that go into a clinic or pretty much any business. But what I like is they're the same. Like if you kind of just ignore the fact that it's a clinic and think of this as a business that services customers, how do you grow that business? You either drive more customers or serve your customers more efficiently so you can bring in more, or maybe it's, your billing and your invoicing is so complicated that you have to streamline that. That's how you grow, or you basically monetize the same customers that you have today against other products, offerings, add-ons, etc. That's the whole game. Whether you're a clinic, whether you're a tech business, whether you're a SaaS, whether you're a brick and mortar store, the game itself is the same.
Yeah, makes sense. Efficiency, get customers in the door, dollars coming in.
In essence, I think if you want to think of it as a machine, every business, clinics included, is a machine that brings customers through the door, helps them do something, right? That's kind of the main service or product that you're offering. And then on the other end, some of them will end up leaving. And so the goal is to maximize people in the door, maximize their satisfaction with the service, sell them more and more things, and have as little of them churn on the other end as possible. And if you kind of think of any business as that, how do you build that box? How do you build that machine?
If I started getting AI involved, though, or if someone started getting AI involved, would the impact be instant, or could this potentially have a lagging effect? Or
I think it depends, and then it is also possible to have negative outcomes too. You don't want to represent as the AI is the next best thing and it's going to solve the problems. It's a balancing act. The way I would do it, if I have my own practice, I would start gradually. I would start by what is the area that is making me either lose money or not make enough money? And I would start with that area. I would look at what solution or solutions I can deploy to solve for that problem. I would start with a pilot, measure the impact from that pilot, and then I'll decide if I'm going to double down or I'm going to scrape this and evaluate something else. And I think, unfortunately, sometimes clinics might try one thing and then stop. I was like, it didn't work for us. I'm like, okay, but there's so many other solutions on the market. Have you looked at those? Oh, there is that other thing that might tackle the problem in a different way. That's why different companies exist. That's why different solutions exist. The key is for you not to get burnt out on one thing and then, throw in the baby with the bathwater and say, you know what, I'm not going to try new things because I tried that thing and that didn't pan out. The key is for you to experiment with different things, measure the impact before you spend more time, more effort, more money with that. And AI agents included, right? So if I am thinking that maybe my phone is the problem, maybe I need a scribe to bring the efficiency, I wouldn't just mass roll it out, because again, there is the other thing you have to factor in is your patient's perception, your staff's perception, your staff's willingness to be on board, right? What the worst outcome will be, you bring a solution in that your staff is not bought in, your patients hate, and then you think it's going to solve everything, right? Of course, you're going to be delusional, and that's not going to solve a thing, and it's going to create more problems than it solves. So it's all of these things. It's like, how do I deploy something easy with my team's buy-in, and then have the patients love it? And that will be the ideal outcome. And once I've kind of I'm starting to see that happen, then I might be doubling down.
Gotcha. So I'm going to use this as an example. So back in kind of 2020, there was a big electric car bubble, and there was this company, Nikola. Do you know Nikola? And
yes.
It was an electric car company, and the CEO got the valuation of more than Ford. And he started dumping shares, selling shares, walked away, I think, a billionaire, maybe not. I don't know how much you walked away with. Do you think some of that is going on in AI right now, where
100%.
the numbers don't match, but people are getting rich?
Of course. I mean, there's a lot of people who are tempted to, fudge the data, and this, whether it's AI or not, this happens in science, this happens in medicine, this happens in pharma. Once the incentives are misaligned and you have a bad actor, just assume there is going to be a bunch of bad actors. So there are people who are probably buying, taking investor money and buying Lambos. I imagine this is happening every day. Of course, we don't hear about them all the time until they get caught, such as that company in India who was, kind of trying to build an AI coding thing, but it turns out they just have a bunch of developers sitting in a room and coding.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I won't be surprised.
Yeah, it's such a complicated thing because to some extent, like as well, there's faking it till you make it. Is that also going on in AI as well, would you say?
Of course. And I think in every company, every startup by definition is like that. It's fake it until you make it. Now, of course, some people go overboard and, fake all the data, fake all the case studies. That is, to me, that's like erring on that extreme. And the other extreme is, you're brutally honest to say, I have no customers today. But like, if you're not able to paint a picture of a potential, whether it's in your investors or your team or whatever, you're going to lose. But if you basically paint a bright, beautiful picture, and this is so divorced from reality, that's also very bad. So you want to kind of be in between. You don't want to, you don't want to under-hype and undersell your stuff that it's really not attractive to anyone, but you also don't want to oversell and overhype your stuff and overhype, how much time it's going to take you to deliver and the quality of what you're going to deliver, such that by the time you deliver it, there is the, hey, you created expectations this high, but then you're delivering a service this low. So it's always kind of the sweet spot between those extremes.
And for physicians, should they be skeptical then getting AI involved in the practice?
Healthy skepticism is what's required, because you veer on one side and you're completely pessimistic, you're going to miss the boat. And then over optimistic if you think this is going to be, solving all my problems and then my clinic is going to be beautiful, I'm like, dude, you're up to a surprise. It's healthy skepticism. Then you pair that with, can I try this thing and make sure it works or not? And then you basically build your own opinion. The opposite is dangerous, whether it's, you're super skeptic or you're super optimistic. I think you want to be somewhere also in the middle, maybe more on the optimistic side of things, because I think without that, it's very hard for you to decide to push forward on anything. So you want some healthy optimism and healthy skepticism is where it's at.
Mm-hmm. And how do you know if someone's bullshitting in the AI space? Is there a way to know?
Without you trying. Without you seeing, like, again, for me, if somebody says, I have this AI that's going to do X, I'm going to be like, show me, right? And I want to test it, and I want to test it for myself. Because it's also, on a demo, everything is easy to fudge. But can I deploy this and get it to work for me is where everybody should be at.
Yeah, I remember I spoke to a clinic once that they signed up for an AI that was like on a guy's laptop. And he's like, yeah, it's going to, once we get it set up in your clinic with your EMR and your phone system and all this stuff, it's going to be exactly the same as this demo that's run on my laptop. It's going to work exactly the same, and they said, okay, signed up.
Yep.
So live demos are a good indicator of technology. I mean, yeah, I could definitely understand that. So last thing then, something that you said, this was an interesting topic, is OpenAI, kind of a different niche, but we'll talk about it. They're hiring bankers now. Why do you think that is? What is this for?
Yeah, so we heard that OpenAI is hiring bankers, and it's actually sitting them in front of models. They're having them chat with models. And I think what they're doing is basically, the foundational LLM with the foundational models are there, right? OpenAI have their models, they continue to improvement. But where we're at is building higher order agents, higher order, whether it's LLMs or higher order agents that are experts. So what a lot of people know is this is happening for bankers, this is common news. But for example, I'm one of the people who was contacted by, not directly by OpenAI. Keep in mind when companies like OpenAI and others do something like this, it's usually subsidiary companies. They're not going to tell you, hey, I'm OpenAI and I want you to come and work with me or for me. It's going to be through subsidiary companies. So I've had recently, like in the last week, I had whom I believe is a subsidiary of OpenAI reach out and saying, we're hiring CTOs. We need you to share with us or reveal to us any code base you're authorized to reveal. And we want you to answer questions about these systems. And they're looking for big systems, something complicated. So we know there's coding tools, but there's a big delta between, a coding tool that builds an app or a simple app versus, building, for example, a large healthcare platform. There's so much more work that goes into that. And there's something that Peter Thiel calls secrets, that Naval Ravikant calls specific knowledge. the knowledge to build large and complex systems. True, it does exist in books, but what exists in books versus what you practice on a day-to-day basis are very different, because, as somebody who's technical, right? And I'll bring this back to physicians, because actually OpenAI or that same subsidiary company is actually now hiring physicians. And so I think this is going to play out in every industry where there is specific knowledge that is not really documented. This is where you need practitioners, right? This is where a kind of theory versus practice differs, right? If I read a data structure book about kind of all the types of data and how we can manipulate different types of data, it's wonderful. But comes to practicality, when the time comes, what patterns would I pick? What patterns service particular industry, the particular company size? That's where the specific knowledge comes in, right? A practitioner, and same with medicine, right? You study medicine for 5, 6, 7, 10 years, but then you have to intern. You have to do your residency. Why do you do that? Because the practicalities of life are always messier, right? Your decisions that you make in an academic setting based on theoretical patient is one thing, but once you have a real patient in front of you, life is always messier. And so what I think is happening is that in every industry, OpenAI is hiring experts at their roles, and these are higher order experts. These are investment bankers, those are bankers, those are chief technology officers, these are physicians that they're hiring to learn from them, to absorb how they think about problems, how do they solve problems, and taking that thinking and carrying it into training AI agents, training specific LLMs. And so to me, this is actually happening. Claude recently, I've also seen Claude launch, I would say, specific agents for specific use cases. And I think that's basically the next generation of AIs and agents that are trained to do a specific job very, very well.
And when they reached out to you, or when they reached out to the bankers or whoever, what's in it for you? Why would you basically train your replacement in the world? What do you get out of it?
Of course, they're offering, what I think is a decent compensation. So for example, on the CTO role, they were offering something like $160 to $250 an hour, which I'm like, okay, great, I'm paid for it. But I think they're gonna see two types of people. I'm of the opinion that I can see our industry, the software industry, being disrupted already by AI agents and by AI. And there are people who are gonna be like, oh man, I don't wanna be part of this. I'm gonna put my head in the sand, pretend this doesn't happen, and just keep going and ride it as long as I can. And then you have people who are more like me. I'm like, look, this is happening. The industry is changing, my industry is changing, the way I've done things will change, and I will be replaced. But I'm of the opinion that I would rather disrupt myself before somebody else disrupts me. And so I would want to be part of that, not necessarily with OpenAI, but if somebody's going to be building an AI CTO, it better be me, is how I think about it.
You don't want them doing it, yeah, fair enough.
I mean, let them do it, but I would do my own version of it, right? That's because keep in mind that even as, if I get 10 people and I say, here's a problem, you're going to get 10 different solutions. And each one of these solutions will have its pros and cons, benefits, trade-offs. And that's why, that's why the free market exists. That's why I think, capitalism works, because in a communist-like setting, everything is standard. Everybody's offered the standard. In a kind of free market setting, everybody gets to have a say. Everybody gets to put their solution on the market, and the market will decide which ones are good and which ones are bad, which ones are die, and which ones will get to stay here and and live and innovate.
Capitalism is awesome. Okay, we'll leave it at that.